I both treat clinically and do clinical research on genetic causes of early life epilepsy, a major one of those being CDKL5 deficiency disorder, and focus on ways that we can better understand the role that these genes play in creating the problems that these patients face in terms of epilepsy, but also in terms of other neurologic issues. It's been a tremendous shift. So, if you had asked 5 years ago, when are we going to have the first gene therapy actually approved and in clinical trials, people would have said, "Oh yeah, it's coming," but that's decades away. And now we actually have an FDA-approved gene therapy for retinal disease, and we have clinical trials for other ones already ongoing. Even 2 years ago, we were at some of the CDKL5 meetings and talking about issues like gene therapy and other disease-modifying therapies. And it was sort of guarded. Yeah, I know it's happening, but it's not happening for CDKL5 yet. That's a ways away. And now we have companies that are actively trying to produce these gene therapies and other important therapies. So that shifted within a year, that we went from saying that's some point that will happen to that's happening now, we need to be ready for it, what do we need to do? If we think about it more broadly, even just outside of CDKL5, we're trying to keep up with the advancements that are occurring in rare diseases. There's a variety of challenges that these therapies create that are wonderful challenges to have because we're actually making a difference on diseases. But how do you implement them? How do you roll them out? How do you ensure access to them for various patients are all challenges that are brought up at the same time. And we, in Colorado, created a complex disease program for therapies that are not just the pill that you take, either ones that require some sort of infusion or injections to treat rare neurologic conditions. And we started off with 2 drugs in that category, and we now have 7 in that category, and it's only about 2 years old. And so at that rate, we're going to have 30 drugs in the next 5 years or something that fall into that category, which makes it an incredibly exciting time. It's also an interesting time for CBD. Being that I'm from Colorado, where CBD has been legalized for many years now as an unregulated non-pharmaceutical grade preparation that you could get from a variety of sources. It's been in use there for several years. And that's a very different situation than where we now are, where the FDA has approved Epidiolex, which is a pharmaceutical grade CBD for epilepsy, specifically for Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. It's not specifically indicated for CDKL5, though there's probably an argument for many patients with CDKL5 qualifying for it, even under the existing sort of regulatory circumstances. That's a big difference, because we always had to say, we don't prescribe this because it was an unregulated industry. We as physicians couldn't prescribe that. So we didn't really know what was happening with our families. We didn't know how much they were actually getting. And now, having something that's pharmaceutical grade, we can prescribe it, we can dose it, we can adjust it with our families. We don't need some other middleman in between. I think it actually creates a much safer scenario for families and for us to be able to interact and deal with them with this new tool. And it's another tool in our tool chest to try to address epilepsy in patients who have really hard to control epilepsy. So the common side effects that have been identified so far are actually similar to many seizure medications. So you can get some fatigue or somnolence, sleepiness. You can have some GI symptoms like diarrhea. There's a couple of other things that have been identified, increased seizures or status epilepticus, of course, is being used to treat seizures. And whether or not it's really triggering those or is not effectively treating them, I think is not totally clear right now. There was a recent report that there are some patients, particularly those who are also on other medications that can affect the liver, like valproic acid, that this may also irritate the liver a little bit. I think the thing we have to be careful about with CBD is that it hasn't been around for that long. And there's probably some side effects that happen rarely that we don't know about yet. So if we take it in comparison to another medication, felbamate was put out on the market with a certain number of indications that were, or a certain number of side effects that were known about it. And after it was on the market, it was actually pulled back off the market because of an association with an effect on the liver. And it can cause liver failure. Well, it turns out that's about 1 in 10,000 patients that can have liver failure. So it's really, really rare. I don't think we've even treated 10,000 patients with Epidiolex thus far. And so something that may be serious but is quite rare is probably beyond the scope of what we currently know for CBD. That's not to say there is something bad like that, but I think we just have to remain a little bit cautious, work closely with your physician, and know that there may be some things that we don't know about yet that could be more severe. Not in Epidiolex, but in patients that were taking CBD from other sources in Colorado. We did have some patients that had pancreatitis, for example, that can be quite serious and life-threatening, actually, that we think was probably related to CBD. So I think there's still some that we're learning about potentially rare but serious side effects that we just have to be a little cautious about.